Go to logi.gg/Datto and use code Datto10 to save money on your next Logitech purchase. A while back, my community and I made a list of all the best legendary weapons in the game. By a while back, I mean well over a year ago. It's probably coming up on 2 years. Today, I would like to update that list with any changes as we go into 2025. Last time, I gave a big preamble about the rules of the video, like the fact that there were no limitations on what weapons could be included in the list, how I collected the data, and more. I'll try to keep it shorter this time around. Number 1A. This is a list of the best items in the game, period, which means they will come from a wide range of sources, from the hardest content like raids and GMs, to some of the easiest stuff in the game, to potentially not even being available to earn right now. Number 1B. This list is geared towards the average player with the average build doing an average piece of content. I cannot account for every single activity, every single build, every subclass, every single situation that you might find yourself in, so I'm going with an average. I know Warden's Law is a bit better with Lucky Pants Hunters. I know. We would be here all day if I covered every single situation. Number 2. It is assumed that you are using a or the god roll of the weapon, whatever it might be, according to community consensus. Number 3, even if you don't have the weapon that I think is the best, if a weapon is even mentioned in this video, it is likely among the best in the game, so don't get too upset. And number 4, if you're watching this sometime in the future, it could be reasonably assumed that the older a best weapon is, the more likely a newer version of that weapon will be better, usually because of a better perk selection. For example, solar grenade launchers haven't had anything new in a while, so I suspect that something is coming eventually. Also, keep in mind that as a primarily PvE player, results may be skewed more towards weapons that drop in PvE as opposed to PvP, although I was as thorough as I could be. This list is a combination of my own opinions and my community's opinions. This list is primarily going to be PvE focused, but I will make mentions of top PvP weapons as they come up. I realize that we are also very close to the release of episode 3, but I plan to update this video series with every major release going forward. They will be shorter in length, only covering the bigger improvements. We'll start with the kinetic slot, starting with autos. Last year, Rufus's Fury from Root of Nightmares was deemed to be the best auto in the game pretty much everywhere, with Chroma Rush being in second place. But last year, I combined Kinetic, Strand, and Stasis into one category since we just didn't have that many options. This year, I have had to split all categories into Kinetic, Strand, and Stasis. Despite that, well, not much has changed in auto rifle world. Chroma Rush got a reissue with episode 2, and with it getting a combo like Subsistence and Kinetic Tremors, it's really tough to argue against it. Although Breakneck from Gambit can get a similar role, it's just more difficult to find. Rufus's Fury continues to be the best Strand option from Root of Nightmares. When it comes to Stasis, however, the poll that I took with my community yielded a wide range of best autos with no real consensus between Crate, a world drop, and Veiled Threat from episode 1, and Fair Judgment, the episode 2 ritual weapon. The one constant between them, the perk Headstone, which makes sense. Last time, Submission from Valve the Disciple was the overwhelming favorite kinetic SMG for PvE, with the Immortal being the dominant PvP SMG at the time, having since received some nerfs. This time, the newest Multi-Mach has taken over the top kinetic slot from Iron Banner, but Submission is almost right behind it. Multi-Mach is one of 3 SMGs with kinetic tremors available, and Bungie gave it out to free for people. Yaravit, the World Drop, and Unending Tempest from Crucible were both considered the top SMGs for Stasis, with Headstone likely again being the main appeal. That being said, if you have Headstone and a half-decent perk on a Stasis SMG, you're probably doing okay. If you don't want Headstone, then all reliable reload plus damage will be just fine. Imminence from Salvation's Edge was overwhelmingly considered the top Strand SMG, but there's only 3 options in the game right now. Imminence has the most up-to-date perks that you can really find, although Hatchling isn't the main reason that people use this. In fact, Chaos Reshaped is the main reason, which is only found on Salvation's Edge weapons as of right now. Last year, Pulse Rifles had a couple of big winners in Smite of Moraine from King's Fall and Disparity from Season 19. However, Blast Furnace was re-released during Into the Light and became the new community darling with its wide range of very strong perks available, although Kinetic Tremors continues to be one of the most popular choices. Bygones also had a re-release in Episode 2, which was insanely dominant in PvP thanks to the High Ground perk, but that has since been nerfed, although Bygones is still a great pulse rifle. Sacred Providence from Garden of Salvation also made an appearance on the community list. There are a lot of very good kinetic slot pulse rifles in the game though, specifically for PvP, like the Messenger. When it came to Stasis, Disparity from Season of the Seraph maintains its top spot, although Stay Frosty from the Dawning made an appearance in the community vote. Strand-wise, Aisha's Care from Trials and Relentless from Prophecy were pretty close together, with their main link being the Headseeker perk. This is more of a PvP thing than a PvE thing, with Aisha's Care recently finding its way into the Trials top 10. I would say Strand pulses in PvE don't really stick out too much compared to other options at this time. Hung Jury was voted the top kinetic scout rifle last year with a large margin of victory. And wouldn't you know it, it too received a re-release with Into the Light with top-of-the-line perks, maintaining its top spot. Randy's Throwing Knife from Crucible and Patron of Lost Causes took up the next 2 slots, but there are many options in this slot. Stasis was pretty split among community voting. 4 of the 5 available all got a decent amount of votes, with Red Tape from Episode 2 getting the most. And yes, they all have Headstone. There are only 4 Strand Scouts in the game, and Fang of Ear Ute from Crota's End took the top spot in community voting. That being said, the most popular role is Keep Away and Precision Instrument, so again, very little to do with Hatchling or any other Strand-based perks. Sidearms were dominated by the burst options last year, with Peace Bond from Iron Banner and Michael's Reverence from Root of Nightmares being the top options. Since then, the Rocket Sidearm archetype was introduced into the game and has become one of the most popular archetypes. The Call from the Pale Heart and Tenacious Mastery from Iron Banner are the only 2 rocket sidearms in the kinetic slot at this time, but are absolutely deserving of spots on the list and are deserving of spots in your inventory. In terms of non-rocket sidearms, things haven't changed too much. Buzzard for the kinetic slot was the overwhelming favorite, while Stasis was Liminal Vigil from Spire of the Watcher or Peace Bond from Iron Banner, both of them being burst sidearms. Strand only has 2 options, but the votes were even between them. Michael's Reverence from Root of Nightmares and Breachlight from Episode 1. When the top options were all pitted against each other in the kinetic slot, Breachlight was voted the number 1 overall by my community, with Michael's Reverence taking the 2nd slot. This time, Strand perks were desired, specifically on Breachlight, like Slice and Hatchling, along with Demolitionist, although Desperate Measures, Pugilist, Swashbuckler, and Adrenaline Junkie were also among the top-picked perks. Fatebringer was the previous PvE hand cannon winner, and it was not even close. But Midnight Coup was re-released, with Into the Light having an insanely strong perk pool, and is my top selection. In case you haven't noticed a pattern here, Into the Light had a lot of good weapons. Midnight Coup was also voted overwhelmingly as the top option, with Fatebringer now in 2nd place. For Stasis, Ias Luna from Grasp of Avarice was considered the top option from my community, which is one of the oldest weapons to be considered best in slot. This is likely because it's a 140 RPM, and most of the other Stasis hand cannon options are 120s or 180s, which aren't as popular to use in PvE. Judgment from Prophecy is the only other 140, which can get Headstone and a damage perk too if you want it. So why Ias Luna over Judgment? I'm guessing a lot more people just have an Ias Luna and didn't want to farm a Judgment. That being said, things like Exuviae from Episode 2 and Bold Endings from the Pale Heart were also in contention with Ias Luna. Even Vulpecula was in the mix. For Strand, there's only 3, but Better Devils from Crucible took the top spot pretty convincingly with its incredibly wide range of perks available compared to Kept Confidence's less than desirable perk pool when we're talking about 140 RPM hand cannons. PvP-wise, Rose is at the top of the food chain in Trials on a week-by-week basis, and there should be one sitting at Banshee for you to grab for free, at least if you're watching during Episode 2 or Episode 3. Criminal's Dagger from Iron Banner also finds itself in the top 10 in Trials quite often, with perks like Precision Instrument, Slideways, Explosive Payload, Outlaw Kill Clip, and Moving Target. Fusion Rifles last time didn't really have that many options. Riptide was the winner almost by default. Now, the picture is, well, it's still pretty clear actually. Riptide continues to be a fantastic PvE option with Chill Clip, with Deliverance being a slower firing, higher damage variant. Both of these options combined for 95% of the stasis vote. But if you're looking for something more damage focused, Scatter Signal, one of the Lightfall era's best crafted weapons, if not the best, is your best bet. Nox Perennial V, a world drop, can roll with Envious and Controlled Burst, which can be a decent replacement for Scatter Signal. Scatter Signal was one of the few weapons that had over 90% of the community vote. On the PvP side, Glacioclasm from the Dawning had a week recently in the top 10 for trials thanks to 2 perk rolls in either Lone Wolf or Under Pressure and Closing Time. However, it's from the Dawning, so if you don't have one right now, you're going to have to wait a while. Grenade launchers, much like fusions, didn't have that many options last time, with Ignition Code getting the top vote. Since then, we have had the Mountaintop re-release, had the introduction of Waveframe GLs in this slot with New Pacific Epitaph from Ghost of the Deep and Tusk of the Boar from Iron Banner, and the introduction of a new archetype, the Area Denial Frame, with Lost Signal being the only one as of this video in this slot. Mountaintop overwhelmingly took the top kinetic slot, while people have fallen in love with this new Area Denial archetype in Lost Signal from Episode 1. Don't sleep on something like Lingering Dread from Duality though, as it can get Chill Clip and Disorienting Grenades to provide great crowd control in endgame environments. Strand only has Tusk of the Boar from Iron Banner, so it just kind of wins by default. Succession from Deepstone Crypt was the previous Kinetic Sniper winner, but since then, the Supremacy from Last Wish has gotten a re-release, which allows it to shoot a lot of shots in a row thanks to 4th times the charm and rewind rounds. Succession did also get a re-release of its own from Into the Light, although that didn't really change people's already good perceptions of the weapon. Both of them combined received 93% of the vote, and I would recommend getting both if possible. Stasis and Strand don't have as many options, but Critical Anomaly from Salvation's Edge was voted number 1, although with a perk combo that is more atypical for a sniper, Chill Clip and Chaos Reshaped. More traditional sniper setups opt for a reload or ammo restoration perk and a damage perk. Strand only has 2 options, but I would lean towards Naeem's Lance from Warlord's Ruin with Reconstruction and Precision Instrument for a more typical damage setup. As far as shotguns went last time, it was very divisive, with a large range of options being considered for PvP. PvE-wise, it was much more clear-cut, with Heritage from Deepstone Crypt being the winner for any damage-focused setups, and almost anything else with 1-2 punch or trench barrel being viable depending on what you need. This time around, Heritage is still barely the top option, but Perfect Paradox is right behind it from Episode 1, although mainly for 1-2 punch. However, it is only one of 2 rapid-fire frame shotguns with 1-2 punch in the kinetic slot, the other one being one small step from the Moon. So realistically, it's the only choice since it has an origin trait, and the origin trait is really good for Perfect Paradox. Swordbreaker from Crota's End was a top Strand option having 1-2 punch, until its return from Season of the Deep does have Trench Barrel if you are hunting that. The picture for PvP now seems to have cleared up as well with the release of Deadlock in Episode 2, not to mention that it too can roll with some good PvE options. The other 2 stasis options are No Reprieve from Season of the Plunder and Fractithist from Season of the Lost, although that is more of a PvP choice if you happen to still have one around. As far as bows went, Accrued Redemption from Garden was the overall winner last time, but not by a massive margin. However, Accrued Redemption did get reissued and can roll with pretty much all of the top perks in the game as far as bows go. We also haven't really gotten that many new bow options since the previous video, and as a result, not only was it voted the top kinetic option, it was voted the best overall kinetic slot bow, and it was not even close. There are only 3 Strand and Stasis bows combined. Energy weapons favor subclass perks arguably more so here, so solar weapons with incandescent or heal clip, arc weapons with jolting feedback or volt shot, and void weapons with repulsor brace and destabilizing rounds continue to dominate the charts. Usually the most recently released weapons tend to be the better options, so if you have a weapon with some combination of these traits, even if it's not my personal top pick or my community's top pick, it's still likely to be a somewhat good weapon. Let's start with auto rifles. Gnawing Hunger, even back in Lightfall, was considered still the best auto rifle in the game, but thankfully, autos have gotten a bit of love since then, although Gnawing Hunger still did get some votes. Rossarago 4, the world drop, was voted number 1 when it comes to Void, and I think I would also give it that distinction thanks to a role like Subsistence Onslaught, although you are at the mercy of RNG. Reckless Oracle wasn't too far behind from Garden of Salvation, although be sure to get a new one or the pattern, not the old one. Again, despite a lot of new Void autos, I still saw write-ins for Gnawing Hunger. I would personally move on from Gnawing Hunger, but if you still have one you like, I'm not going to stop you. Solar was a bit more split, with no hesitation from the Pale Heart and the Summoner from Trials basically tying for first place. I would personally lean more towards the Summoner, unless you really plan on utilizing No Hesitation's support frame to actually heal and support. The Summoner can get Heal Clip Incandescent, it can get Subsistence Onslaught, there's a lot to like here. Amid AR2 from a crafting quest line and Abyss Defiant from Crota's End basically tied for third place. Arc was a bit more confirmed by my community, with Pyroelectric Propellant from Vesper's Host taking it with 63% of the vote overall. Jolting Feedback is the name of the game here, with Attrition Orbs, Eddy Current, and Strategist being the top options to pair with it. It's only been recently that Arc autos have gotten any Jolt support, so it's not much of a surprise here to see this at the top, with Jolting Feedback vibing a bit better than Volt Shot on auto rifles. Next, we have pulses. The previous winner of Best Solar and Best Overall Pulse was the BXR from Dares of Eternity, and to be fair, is still a pretty good choice overall. We've had quite a few pulses roll in, some notable, some not, but Nullify from Salvation's Edge is the most updated Solar Pulse with most top-of-the-line perks available, and my community thought so as well. But BXR is still in second place for Solar. Arc Pulses, on the other hand, were split many different ways with no real consensus winner. Corrasion, Vantage Point, and Insidious from Episode 2, 1, and Vow the Disciple, respectively, took the 1, 2, and 3 slots, with Oversoul Edict from Crota's End not too far behind. Shouldn't surprise you to hear that all of these have some form of Jolt in their perk pools. Void Pulses were split between Elsie's Rifle from Into the Light and Grid Skipper, freshly updated for Episode 2. Both of these pulses have PvE and PvP perk combos, with PvE players hunting the double Void perk combo of Repulsor Brace and Destabilizing Rounds, and PvP players looking for Head Seeker and some other stability, handling, or range type perk. Elsie's Rifle continues to be a top 3 most commonly used Trials weapon over the past several months, based on total kills per Trials weekend. Moving to Scout Rifles, Vouchsafe from Dreaming City and Doom of Chelchis from Kingsfall were the split winners last time. And since the previous video, we haven't really gotten that many new Legendary Scout Rifles in this slot. In fact, we've gotten 4 new Scout Rifles, and one of them was Vouchsafe. Again, Doom of Chelchis maintains its top Void Scout positioning, with not nearly as much love coming to Vouchsafe this time around. Solar-wise, Trustee from Deepstone Crypt, the crafted version, edged out a win over Time-Worn Wayfarer from Episode 1. And Arc's winner was Tarnished Metal from Season of the Plunder due to lack of innovation in the Arc Scout archetype. Don't be surprised to see an Arc Scout with Jolting Feedback at some point, because when you do, it'll likely become the next best Arc Scout. Hand Cannons, on the other hand, there's a lot more going on here, trust me. Zali's Bane from King's Fall, to me, is definitely the number 1 option here, with it becoming my 3rd highest kill count weapon across my entire account. My audience seems to agree, with it getting 2/3 of the vote. Luna's Howl from Into the Light came in a distant second place. Epochal Integration from Lightfall would be my personal replacement for Zali's Bane. Of course, Igneous Hammer for PvP seems to always be a contender thanks to Precision Instrument being a top 10 Trials killing weapon for months now. Nation of Beasts from Last Wish was a popular Arc option last time, and it's been updated with perk combos like Dragonfly and Volt Shot or Explosive Payload, making it the now still favorite. It received 50% of the vote, with Posterity from Deepstone getting second place, followed by Sightline Survey from Episode 1. Newly refreshed Ancient Gospel from Garden of Salvation takes the top Void spot thanks to Destabilizing Rounds and Explosive Payload, although its competition isn't exactly that fierce. Word of Crota from Crota's End, Palindrome from Nightfalls, which hasn't been around for a while, and Mahi's HC4, a world drop, were next to follow. Ancient Gospel being a 140 RPM hand cannon certainly helps the usability factor. Much like the kinetic slot, the energy slot sidearm category is dominated by rocket sidearms, Indebted Kindness from Warlord's Ruin, and Aberrant Action from Episode 1. However, if you're lucky enough to see Heliocentric, a world drop, with Heel Clip and Incandescent, it is an amazing close-range option, one that I relied on heavily for my Vespers Host solo flawless dungeon run. That being said, the normal sidearm world, much like the scout rifle world, has not really had that many new ones introduced. Arc sidearms are still heavily in favor of Brigand's Law from Season of the Plunder, again being a jolt applicator, with the only other one being Anonymous Autumn, reissued in Episode 2. Insurmountable from Episode 2 is the new Void sidearm winner, likely because we haven't really gotten that many, and this is simply the most up-to-date one released. Brass Attacks from Season of the Chosen, one of the oldest weapons on here, got second place, so that should paint a pretty clear picture of the state of Void sidearms. Fusion rifles last year were considered the most balanced, with no true consensus winner, but we lacked the Controlled Burst perk back then, meaning any fusion without Controlled Burst is really going to need to justify a reason in your inventory outside of PvP. Most new fusions have released with this perk though, in fact only one hasn't, which is Gravitic Arrest from Vesper's Host, instead having the new perk Withering Gaze. That being said, pretty much any well-rolled fusion rifle, usually consisting of Controlled Burst and some kind of a reload or ammo perk, is gonna be fine in 99% of content, and there's a lot of them in this slot. Techian Force from Last Wish, Loaded Question and Plug 1 from Nightfalls, the Eremite from Season of the Witch, Axial Lacuna from the Pale Heart, and Zealot's Reward from Garden of Salvation. That being said, even old classics like Cartesian Coordinate, a World Solar Drop, and Null Composure, the Season of the Splicer Ritual, were still placing high on community votes. Cartesian placed better than Axial Lacuna. I don't know if I'm going that far back, but I wanted to include it nonetheless. Grenade launchers are still dominated by the Waveframe archetype, and Forbearance from Val the Disciple and Into the Light is still considered one of the best Waveframe grenade launchers in the game, despite a nerf to Chain Reaction, which is the main perk selected with it. It got almost 90% of the arc vote. But a new challenger has come along in the Area Denial frame, Velocity Baton from Vesper's Host. Not just any Velocity Baton though, specifically one with Attrition Orbs. This archetype with Attrition Orbs is able to print Orbs of Power en masse. The output is so absurd that it wouldn't surprise me if Bungie reduced the potency of this perk on this weapon specifically. However, outside of that, Waveframes are still dominant, and the choice is simply whichever element you happen to need. Undercurrent from Nightfalls is a good option for the non-raiders whenever it's around, and Martyr's Retribution got a reissue in Episode 1. Void finally has some kind of an update in Harsh Language. Even if I don't think it's that great, I would still use Deafening Whisper from Season of the Hunt forever ago if you have one. And it also has Truth Teller, which I just also don't think is that great. Velocity Baton secured 80% of the community vote for Void. Shotguns also really haven't changed that much since last time. Oftentimes, they are used as a vehicle to supply a perk like 1-2 Punch or to trigger other effects, or they just use Trench Barrel for some kind of burst damage. Last year, Nessa's Oblation was highest rated just for the damage output as a slug shotgun, but we've only had 2 new pinpoint slug frame shotguns since then, neither of which are of any note, especially since Nessa's Oblation didn't make that many waves at the time. And even still, we got 4 new Void shotguns. Nessa's Oblation outvoted all of them, although I still need to try out my Scavenger's Fate Discord Harmony combo from Episode 2. There haven't been too many shotguns that have really made things exciting in PvE world. The only clear winner anywhere for PvE was the ikelos shotgun, reissued back in Season of the Seraph, as it continues to be a favorite and top tier choice. There were a bunch of write-ins for an old copy of First In, Last Out, I assume with auto-loading and Vorpal. I'd keep it stowed away for now if you still have one, but if you don't, it's no big deal. Outside of that, Prophet of Doom from Garden was voted number 1 for Arc, followed by Found Verdict from Vault of Glass, with Prophet of Doom having both Trench Barrel and 1-2 Punch to work with, on top of being the potential number 1 choice for PvP shotgunners, with Threat Detector and Closing Time being the most dominant perk options. If you don't want to grind that out, stick with your Matador 64 from Grasp of Avarice, but if you want to get something new, Scavenger's Fate from Episode 2 is a contender with Slide Shot or Lone Wolf and Closing Time. Snipers in PvE have only just recently gotten some real attention for the first time in years, but the rules of PvE snipers are still the same. Some kind of reload or ammo perk like 4th Time's the Charm, with some kind of a damage perk like Firing Line, Precision Instrument, or even Vorpal Weapon if you have nothing else. If you have some combination of this, almost regardless of the fire rate, you should probably get faster firing ones, then you should be fine. Arc snipers are actually so terrible overall that I don't even feel like declaring a winner, but the most votes went to Macabre from Festival of the Lost. Arc is in dire need of a solid PvE sniper. Void isn't too great either, to be honest. Sovereignty from Episode 2 won the overall vote, but things were pretty split between it, Embraced Identity from Pale Heart, Fugue 55, a world drop, and Valletta F, another world drop. The most traditional boss DPS sniper of the bunch is technically Fugue 55 with 4th Times and Firing Line, although Embraced Identity has Precision Instrument and a couple of reload options. Solar-wise, things were super close with Ikelos from Season of the Seraph and Omniscient Eye updated from Garden of Salvation. Both of these have 4th Times the Charm, but Ikelos has Focused Fire versus Omniscient's Eye's Precision Instrument. Both of these perks require a strong ability to hit crits reliably and consistently. PvP-wise, Beloved was the overall winner last time. It wasn't even close, but I see very little reason to change things up PvP-wise with snipers, as I don't believe the meta of sniper perks has really shifted since the last time we did this. Trace rifles have had only one new release since last time, in Chronophage from Episode 1, with Repulsor and D-Stab being the top option. If you didn't get Hollow Denial, then this is your only Void option. And like last time, just bring the one that suits your needs the most. There are now 2 Void, 2 Solar, and 1 Arc Trace rifle, so there's just not that many options available. Bow-wise, the winners are relatively clear, at least for Arc and Solar. Non-denouement from Salvation's Edge is simply the most up-to-date, and while the same doesn't exactly go for Tyranny of Heaven from Last Wish, its perk selection more than makes up for it in Dragonfly and Incandescent. If you don't care for Dragonfly, then you have more options to pick from, like Pre-Astrianax 4 from Nightfalls, and man, I hope I said that right. Void's newest bow in Lethophobia is from Season of the Wish, which I did not really find that exciting. And if the newest thing is not that exciting, the older stuff is definitely not either. Look for another Void bow to release in the next few months that will maybe change this. Under Your Skin from Season of the Risen was barely voted number 1 by my community, with Lethophobia being just right behind it. Finally, glaives have still not caught on in the general Destiny community. They've gotten tons of buffs and adjustments since the last time we discussed them, and in the right hands, they are very strong. If you don't know what you're doing, then they are an extreme liability in harder content. In easier stuff, you can definitely skew more towards offensively driven perks, but those looking for higher end PvE options probably want Replenishing Aegis and Unstoppable Force or Close to Melee, which can be found on the Trials Glaive Unexpected Resurgence whenever it happens to be around. Rake Angle is a new stasis glaive that recently released, dropping in Nightfalls, which can get Chill Clip and Rhyme Stealer among other options. Before we hit power weapons, a similar note to what I said about energy weapons. Most of the time, the choice behind your power weapon will be driven by the activity you are in, or even the week you happen to be playing. Most of the time, it is very smart to simply match your weapon to the surge of the activity you are in, because it's just free damage. I wouldn't recommend just taking some absolute garbage just because it matches a surge, but in lower end content or with certain weapon archetypes, you certainly could get away with it. But most people chase the surge, which will directly influence which power weapon you bring for the most part. There are a ton of good machine guns in the game, but last year's winner was Commemoration from Deepstone Crypt with Recon and Killing Tally. And personally, I still think it deserves the title of best overall machine gun. I still use it to this day. 450 RPM machine guns still reign supreme in my eyes, although 360 and 600 RPMs are definitely usable. That being said, Hammerhead, released with Into the Light, received a healthy chunk of votes from my community, also able to get a lot of great perks. Fixed Odds from Duality or Avalanche from the Dawning are great solar options, while Arc is a little bit lacking, with Song of Uriut being the newest Arc machine gun and probably the best choice. Strand and Stasis-wise, you don't have a lot to pick from, but I'd be going with Pro Memoria from the Pale Heart with Recon and Bait and Switch, and then Quillam's Terminus from King's Fall, or Archon's Thunder from Iron Banner. Linear fusions are good, but have fallen behind just a little bit. Last year, Cataclysmic from Valve the Disciple was the champion, and it is still a very good linear fusion. Since then, we've seen linear after linear come out, slowly widening the range of linears with different elements. Scintillation from Nightfalls for Strand, Suspectum 4FR World Drop for Stasis, Line in the Sand from Episode 1 for Arc, Doomed Petitioner from Season of the Wish, or Mistral Lift from the Dawning for Void. There are now a range of linears to pick from instead of just needing to grind Vow of the Disciple. At the end of the day, though, the linear you pick up will likely be whatever one you have easiest access to. For example, Reed's Regret and Fire and Forget both outvoted Suspectum 4FR, but Suspectum is a world drop and therefore incredibly accessible. Storm Chaser outvoted Line in the Sand by a little bit. Cataclysmic outvoted Briar's Contempt 3-1, although I do think you should get both. And Doomed Petitioner won over Mistral Lift by a little bit, but again, I would like to have both anyway. Same rules as snipers. A reload or ammo perk plus a damage perk will be the best option the majority of the time. Rockets have fallen off a tiny bit lately, although it's rare that G-Horn spam is ever the worst damage strategy. Yet again, you're going to want a reload or ammo perk plus a damage perk, but generally speaking, the more rockets you can fire without reloading, the better, which is why Cold Comfort from Ghost of the Deep with Envious Assassin is so good. It enables you to shoot a lot of rockets in a row without reloading. However, Tomorrow's Answer from Trials currently gets Envious Arsenal and Bait and Switch, which is a very good combo, allowing you to freely rotate your weapons without ever triggering a reload on the rocket. Although by no reloading, I do also kind of mean no switching weapons too, but it's still really good. Apex Predator from Last Wish can get Recon and Bait and Switch, front-loading some damage. Having all three is just ideal, though, in case you need to worry about surges. Strand only has two options, and one of them, Crowning Duologue, is only around once a year for a couple of weeks. Arc has a few options, but Crux Termination 4, a world drop, is dropping constantly and has a wide array of perks to pick from based on what you're doing. Clown Cartridge, Recon, Envious Assassin, Tracking, Explosive Light. Grenade launchers are now very strong options in Damage World, and the number one is pretty definitively the VS Chill Inhibitor from Vesper's Host. It had the largest margin of victory out of every weapon we've talked about today when compared to its peers. Depending on when you watch this, you still might be able to straight up buy a God Roll, Envious Arsenal, and Bait and Switch from the Gunsmith in the tower for reasons I'm not going to get into here. One of the best weapons in the game, as of this video, it's off of a vendor. Bitter/Sweet from Episode 2 can also get this roll, an Arc variant with a slower rate of fire, along with Wicked Sister from the Vanguard in a Strand variant, although it's a bit harder to get it because it can roll with 12 perks in each column instead of the usual 6. After those will be things like Edge Transit from Into the Light, which is Void, and a top-tier Void option, and a top-tier option in general, or Cataphract from Trials of Osiris, which is Strand. Solar doesn't really have a top-tier grenade launcher option at the moment, but the longer we go without one, the more likely it is that we will see one eventually come to the game. For now, you're looking at Cry Mutiny, the Season of the Plunder ritual weapon, or Marcillian Sea, which is a world drop. Finally, swords. No true consensus was made last year, although Falling Guillotine was mentioned as an old reliable choice. Fortunately, it was made available again through Into the Light with a much wider range of perks, including Eager Edge, which is an incredibly popular perk for movement. The other half from Dares, along with the Slammer from Nightfall, can also get Eager Edge, and Half-Truths also from Dares, I know. Relentless Strikes and Whirlwind Blade is a reliable damage perk setup, even if it's not as good as it used to be, on basically any sword. If a sword has that combo, it's fine. All that being said, most people do still skew towards Falling Guillotine or the other hand strictly because of Eager Edge and a damage perk, although the Slammer is overwhelmingly the favorite stasis pick. Otherwise, if you truly want to match your element to the Surge, you're just grabbing whatever happens to be available for that element wherever you happen to find it. Summon Bonum from Salvation's Edge, with Bequest being a second place option from Deepstone Crypt. Both of those are Arc. False Idols from Episode 1, or again, anything that happens to have Relentless and Whirlwind. Solar. Strand, I would go for Dragon Cult Sickle if you really need to, but probably stay away from Strand. I left out class swords because not everyone has one of each class, and I don't even think they're possible to get anymore anyway, at least as of right now. I think that's everything. Of course, everything here is my opinion, but we have a small sample size from my community voting in as well to help guide things along. I'm sure not everyone is going to agree with every single pick that I've made, but I do think that this is still a pretty solid list, all things considered. Like I said, I'll be updating this list a little more frequently going forward, depending on the kinds of weapons we get access to. If I think the list needs an update, I will update. Otherwise, I will continue to drop my weapon drop videos every single episode, season, expansion, whatever, for continued guidance on the best weapons in the game. Thank you all very much for watching. I will see you next time.